Hello students and welcome to our class, SOC241 Race and Ethnicity. I'm your professor, Justine Hecht, as per usual, and it's great to be here with you all. Maybe I should come up with a new intro, right? Well, we'll figure it out. And anyway, I'm just coming on here really quickly. I'm almost done grading your midterms. I've got 8 more to go. And it is taking me a little time because I'm trying to give you really useful and supportive feedback. But I did want to get on here today and just offer some insights for the next step of the project. That way you don't have to wait on me to finish grading your work. You can kind of start thinking about what your next steps are, right? So you can keep moving along here. And so the next step of your project is going to be using your annotated bibliography. You've done some preliminary research. You probably are going to have to go back and review the sources that you chose, read them more carefully, read them closer, pull out some quotes that you think are helpful, so on and so forth, to start preparing to write your rough draft of your submission to our racial justice database. And so this is going to be due in Module 12. You can see the exact date on Canvas. And this is kind of what you're expected to do for the rough draft. You're expected to start writing up your explanatory analyses number 1 and number 2, and each explanatory analysis should come with a picture as well. And so they're just a little bit different from each other. The first explanatory analysis is asking you to describe the history of your racial justice movement. Where did the movement come from? What were the political, economic, and social issues present at the time it emerged? And so, for example, if you're looking at the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, you're going to tell me about how they organized freedom rides, most likely. Or something like this, at least. You're going to tell me about the work that they were organizing. But why were they organizing that work? Why did they need to have freedom rides in the first place? Make sure you're also including some of that broader social context so we can understand what kind of world folks are creating their movements in, right, and building their movements in. And what type of social movement is this? And so this is going back to Module 4 and those 4 types of social movements we reflected on there. You likely already identified what type of movement you think your group represents. And so go back to the Module 4 assignment and review my comments if you need to reflect on that a little bit more again, right? And so this one is getting at kind of like the history of the movement. Who were they? What did they do? What was going on at that time period? And so for the second one, you're now moving into what changes did they start to make, right? How did they go about creating those changes? What tactics did they use? Did they do things like sit-ins? Did they do things like voter registration? Did they lobby public officials? Did they write poetry, right? Whatever kind of tactics they used to facilitate social change or for racial justice. And then what was the outcome, right? This is what the changes they were trying to make. Were they successful? What changes did they end up making? If they didn't make any changes, why not? What happened? What limited their ability to create those types of changes, right? And for both of these, you're going to be using one theoretical framework to help you answer these questions. And so theoretical frameworks, we pretty much introduce we introduce several each week, but these are things like racial formation theory, intersectionality, the concept of colonization, genocide, whiteness, right, white supremacy. These are all theoretical frameworks that are used to analyze historical and social experiences, okay? And so your job is to choose one that you think best explains some aspect of your social movement. And so, for example, if you're looking at Black Lives Matter, and you're looking at your explanatory analysis 1, where does this movement come from? You might use the framework of white supremacy to explain how the movement evolves to uplift Black lives specifically, right? So how does a social order of white supremacy thus necessitate a movement to insist that Black lives matter, right? Or, you know, if you're talking about what your movement did, let me think of something. So maybe you're talking about the I don't think anybody is doing this in this class, but it's a decent example nonetheless. You're talking about the movement to obtain the right to vote for women, and you're looking at the movement to obtain the right to vote for Black women in particular, right? And so what you might notice is that white women in that movement didn't necessarily fight for the rights of Black women to vote. Instead, they tended to focus on the needs of white women to vote instead. Take my gender and society class if you want to learn more about that, by the way. And so one of the tools that you might use there to help you make an analysis is intersectionality, right? How would the movement for Black women to have the right to vote changed if white women had been aware of how their oppression was connected to Black women as well? Or how does intersectionality help us understand the connections between these movements, okay? So those are just some examples. But you can ask that question, right? Whatever framework you're using, how does X framework help me understand this specific issue? How does colonization help me understand missing and murdered Indigenous women? How does racial formation theory help me understand the emergence of a Latino identity during this time period? These kind of things, okay? So I hope that's somewhat helpful. So, and again, you need an accompanying photograph for your explanatory analyses. And so I'm asking you to please include an archival photograph for the first one that represents the history of the movement. Now on our, let me go over here on our homepage, pull this down a sec. On our homepage, oops. Okay, so sorry about that. On our homepage, you will find useful Google Sites and research tutorials, and also digital photo and movement history archives and resources. Now, I couldn't possibly anticipate all the different movements that you would study, of course, right? But I have gone through and added some resources into this website that hopefully get at least some of the movements that you all are studying. And even if they don't, these might be starting places for you to go explore your own movements. You also are highly encouraged to take advantage of the library resources. So you can go to the library and say, hey, my crazy professor wants me to find an archival photo of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. How do I possibly do that? And they will be able to help you, okay? You can also ask me, but I promise the librarians will actually be better at that aspect than I will, okay? So there's that. So first one, I want you to find an archival one to include with your first explanatory analysis. For explanatory analysis number 2, it can be either an archival one or a contemporary photo. And so contemporary photos you may be more likely to find on Google, right? Either way, however you find your photos, be sure to include a citation for them, okay? For this one, number 2 as well, if you don't want to bother to find a contemporary photo, that's fine. You don't have to. You can create something instead, right? You can create your own imagery. You could create some digital art. You could even create like a poem or like a timeline or something like this, some kind of visual or creative aspect to add in to your explanatory analysis too. Preferably something that reflects your explanatory analysis, right? Okay, so I think that's that. I think I talked really quickly there, so if that's the case, please post any questions you have in the community forum. The other thing that I want to just explain very quickly is that I'm not looking for you to summarize the sources that you found. You already summarized them in the annotated bibliography, and so you don't need to do that again, right? What I'm looking for you to do is to synthesize your sources. And so right now you are working on a final written piece. I think, what is the word limit? 400 to 500 words in this class, I think, whatever the word limit is. And so you can think of each of the 4 sources that you have as one piece of that final draft, right? And so what you're doing is you're bringing the pieces together to form a whole. So how do these sources speak to each other? You guys aren't in groups, so don't worry about that part there. But let me do it this way. Think through what you found. Sorry about that. What you found. just fixing that for you also. It's more specific to your class. I have another class where we do a research project in groups, and so sometimes, you know, we reuse sources because it's a lot of work to create these things. So anyway, what you're doing is you're bringing those pieces together. And so your goal, what you want to do when you're reviewing your annotated bibliography, that's a tool for you. That's something useful for you to use to write up your rough draft. And so when you're looking through it, start looking for patterns and themes in your sources and gaps as well. And so what ideas are present in each source? How do those ideas connect with each other in each source? What kind of impression about your social justice, your racial justice movement does your source leave behind, right? This is why I have you ask questions in your annotated bibliography, because those questions can become kind of like guiding tools for you to write up your drafts, essentially, right? You can answer your questions as a tool to write your drafts. That is what those are used for, okay? Okay, you know what? Don't worry about this one. And yeah, don't worry about point 3 here. Oh, you can tell I'm overworked right now. I've got too many things going on. I'm missing key details in your slides. My apologies. So ignore number 3, but think about, again, what ideas are showing up in your sources and how do those sources speak together, right? And so what you might do is you take say we have source A and B. Source A, you take a quote from, and then source B, you use to help you explain that quote in a different way, right? And this way you're bringing 2 pieces of literature that say different things into conversation with one another to tell a different story, essentially, okay? I don't know if that's helpful. I hope it is. If you have any questions, again, please let me know. Reach out. I am here to help you. When you're writing up your synthesis, what I'm looking for is to see the title of your organization. So here, this is something I pulled from another student project on worker movements. And so this is looking at United Campus Workers of Arizona. And then you're going to write up your submission, your draft, right? Blah, 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 350, 400 words. And then you're going to have your reference page, and your references should be listed alphabetically, okay? Now, in theory, you already have all of your citations formatted properly in APA format. And so all you have to do is get rid of the annotations, and you have your reference page ready, okay? All right. I hope that is helpful. Let me know if it's not, and let me know if you have any questions. I am very happy to offer support, and I will have your annotated bibliographies graded by tomorrow. My apologies, time just keeps getting away from me, and I just can't work 16-hour days, y'all, so I gotta take rest. So, all right, folks, I will see you next time. Take care. Bye-bye.